Okay, sorry.
Okay. All right. We're
There you go.
live now. Yep.
All right, well, I will call the meeting to official order. I guess before we start, I'd just like to thank the rec department, the DPW, and all the village staff and employees that made such a great Veterans Day service yesterday. Special thanks to Greg Nielsen and Jim Brennan for always being the true MCs of the day, and thank you to all the veterans. I thought it was nice to see some people masked and socially distanced outside, but it was a great ceremony, and I just want to thank everyone that made that possible. Moving ahead to the agenda items, first is a meeting with the Housing Committee to review the proposed North Broadway zoning. Obviously, last week was the you just had something to say, Larry, or
No. Go
I was
right
going to say
ahead.
last week was the first time we publicly shared the newest version of it. We wanted to formally get the Housing Committee's important feedback on it. Since we, a lot of what we did, we kind of had them in mind. We wanted to formally give them the opportunity to, comment on this and do it in a public forum. So that's kind of the task for tonight.
So if you give me a minute, I have the Housing Committee members. I'm going to go one by one and promote them to panelists so that they're up here meeting with you, so to speak.
Sure.
So they're ready for that. Okay. I think that's all I see in the audience. If someone thinks I'm missing something, Deb, if you're there and you hear us, if you think I'm missing anyone, let me know. But I have you up here.
You're all on mute.
Yeah.
Karen's not on mute.
I'm unmuted.
Deborah's not on mute. Tom was off and then back on.
I don't know.
There you go.
There we go.
Okay. And Sue's on mute also. Deb, we can hear you now. Looks like, oh, there you go.
Yeah.
There you are. All right. Welcome.
Hi there.
All
Great.
right. So the mayor kind of introduced the whole topic here, but I think, I know you heard probably the last meeting a bit and had a chance to take a look at the legislation. I don't know if you have any specific questions or if you have comments. We can run through some of the questions if you have any, but we're happy to hear from you and see what you think.
Okay, I guess I'll start since I'm up there in the top row. I think, we did not have any advance notice of kind of major shift in two areas. One, taking out the two larger properties from the zoning proposal, and two, adding the incentives for moderate income housing. So we were caught a little by surprise in those areas, and we had a meeting a couple of nights ago, but there was a lot of, there wasn't really a consensus in terms of how the committee felt about those changes overall. So we really didn't come up with any position as a committee. So we're kind of here to speak individually, I guess still as representatives of the Housing Committee, but we didn't really have time, and I'm not sure that time is really the issue, but we really didn't come up with a sort of unified response. So does that sound about right, fellow committee members?
Right. Sounds 100% right, yes.
Great. Well, we're happy to hear each individual's, informed opinions. So that's fine as well.
Does anybody else want to start, or should I continue?
Please continue.
So I think going forward, as the board is considering, revising proposals in the housing arena, if we could be brought in earlier, so that we have a little bit more of a sense of where the board's going with its revisions, and we have time to do a little bit of research and possibly come up with some alternatives, that would be helpful. As it is, we did not have time to look into how other villages are addressing.
Well, I'll just interrupt you for 1 second there, Deb. We have all the time in the world. If you guys want to do research and it's like, I feel like we have to always, it's always a bit of a chicken and the egg. Like we kind of came up with a draft and now, let us know what you guys think you need. So it's, I think it's, so I don't think we're out of time. That's for sure.
Okay, well, that's good. So in any event, I personally understand the reason to focus on the 3 properties fronting North Broadway. They're very different from the 2 larger properties that are less accessible from Broadway and less visible. So I think that's probably a good plan. On the other hand, I'm a little bit concerned about what will happen with those large properties, since they, as I understand it, will then remain zoned single family 1 acre. And if they should suddenly come on the market, that would be very unfortunate. So I don't know what the intention is with that, but in any event, I actually like the fact that you guys decided to offer some enhancements for moderate income units. I think that, obviously in the whole affordable housing crisis, there are many underserved markets where additional units are needed. But I think that is a segment that, especially in Irvington, is hugely underserved. And I think coming up with, ways to incent developers to offer more housing for that group from 100 to 150% of AMI is great. I think we would like to see maybe some offered at, say, 100% AMI, as opposed to only 120 and 150%. So if we have the 6 units or the 10% for FAH units at 80%, then it jumps up to 120%, and that kind of middle ground is not addressed at all. I realize that financially, it would probably be more difficult to incent a developer to build at that level, but I think there's probably ways of tweaking. And I think there may still be some nonprofit developers out there who could be tapped and could be interested in some of the older properties. There's a lot of people doing a lot of interesting things with affordable housing. So, it's possible. I was also personally, I was happy to see that the incentives remained for reusing the historic buildings. I think it would be a real shame to lose those, and I hope that they can be incorporated into whatever gets built. And that's about it. I think we want to continue focusing, not raising. I mean, a family of 4 at 188,000 is kind of a tough sell for affordable housing, and yet that's what the 150% would be targeted to. Now, I realize that's difficult in Irvington to find something at that wage level, but we have to remember the people who are at 100% as well and lower. So that was kind of rambling. I'm sorry. It's been a long couple of days, but there we are. I'm done.
Great, thank you. Who would like to go next?
Well, I'll go next, but I'm only speaking for myself in this respect, not for the committee, because as Deb said, it was no consensus among those on the committee. But one of the things I'd like to see personally is a simplified summary of this, because the whole North Broadway group of properties, I'll say, the rezoning of it, this has been going on since last year, 2019. And there was so much disagreement and so much opposition that I'm concerned most of all that the community is as confused as I was before I read this through entirely, but also that it would, if they recognized that whatever is done about the rezoning, that any developer is going to have to come in and get approval on a specific site or specific development. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding on that also about what rezoning actually means for properties like this. I remember when I was serving at the Abbott House, we were there by special permit, and at that time had to come in every 3 years for renewal of the special permit on the big property, even though that property had been there since 1963. So I think there is a great deal of misunderstanding and also lack of understanding about what this really means as far as long-term effects and long-term development is concerned. That's about all I wanted to say. I have a lot more opinions about it, but I'm a great supporter of multifamily housing. And I remember before the housing settlement agreement in 2009, the county was doing a lot of workforce housing, they called it at that time, and it was up to 125% of the AMI. So, I mean, this is not unheard of. On the other hand, I think going up that high in some ways would make it almost more acceptable to the community if we were able to say that's why we're going up this high, but also have a lower group also, I'll say, or a bottom line maybe.
Should we go with Susan next, just to go ladies first, and then we'll go to Tom?
Susan, you're on mute.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything to contribute to this conversation at this time. I want to listen a little bit more before I express my opinion.
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Tom?
So I'm totally in support of the new uses that are laid out in the proposed rezoning. I think that's great. And I do, however, have a number of concerns. And my first concern really has to do with the density bonuses. And I looked up, for example, for somebody making 120% of the AMI, what kind of house that they could afford. And excuse me, I'm just going to look with my glasses because I have the figures. And after a 20% down payment, that figure came back a house worth $846,391. So that would strike me as way too high. That doesn't strike me as a moderate income house. And then, of course, if you looked at 150% of the MI, the kind of house that a bank would lend somebody with that kind of income money for would be much more expensive. So simply put, the between the market priced units and the units for quote moderate income from 120 to 150% of AMI, I don't think that would do much to really diversify the housing stock. Now, granted, if there were 100 units, 150 units, we do have the 10% set aside for affordable housing, which is good at 80%. But even that doesn't really get to the heart of the matter as far as I'm concerned. And to me, the heart of the matter is that there's, in this country, but specifically in this county, an affordable housing crisis. And you had a presentation, we know about the report. We know there's over 11,000 units needed in Westchester County. And I looked at the population of Westchester and the population of of Irvington and did the math, and we represent about 0.68 of the county, and then I put that into the 11,000 number. So I came up with 80 units basically of affordable housing so that we could do our share, so to speak, proportionally. So that's many, many more units that would be created with the current set asides. So, you know, and of course we could build more. So, I mean, that's very, very ambitious, but I also think that in many respects, Irvington could consider really stepping up to the plate here. I mean, why should it just be left for other communities? As many of you probably know, Peekskill recently broke ground on a $50 million affordable housing development, energy efficient, put together with all sorts of different public funding streams, 82 units of varying sizes that are pegged at between, let's see, 40 to 80% of the AMI. So that's a really, really ambitious project. It's being done by a developer out of Chappaqua. And it's part of a $20 billion 5-year plan that New York State has. So it's a mix of, in that case, brownfield money, county money, state money, federal money. But, you know, that's a really, really interesting project to me. And so I just think that, you know, this is, you know, if we're going to pursue this rezoning, which I think is really important to pursue, I think this is an opportunity for us. And I'm sure there are people in the village, myself included, who would sit on a task force and put a lot of time and effort into this to try to explore what it would mean to actually do affordable housing on 1, 2, or 3 of the subject, truly affordable housing on 1, 2, or 3 of the subject parcels. And, you know, I think, you know, our school teachers, I'm the husband of a school teacher, you know, municipal workers, the people who make our sandwiches at Jordane's, the people who do our dry cleaning. I mean, it'd be incredible, I think, to try to pursue what it might mean to provide some housing in the village for folks like that. So this is really the last chance, really, I think, probably the last chance for Irvington to consider this. And so I would just strongly suggest that the board might want to think about what that might mean.
Well, thanks for that, Tom.
Brian, I'm sorry. Can I just ask, so the challenge here is that we certainly, and I think the board members would agree, we certainly would love to see a project that provided, you know, a very high percentage of affordable housing, whether it's 100% or not much less than that. But the challenge here is that, you know, we're trying to zone these properties and we don't control these properties, you know, and we're obviously not developers, and neither is the housing committee. So, you know, the challenge is how to make that happen. And I don't know whether there's any zoning techniques that are available that can make that happen. I suppose there can be stronger incentives for truly affordable housing as compared to any other levels of housing, but, and maybe that's something we have to look into, but
isn't it the case, sorry to interrupt, but isn't it the case that once it's I mean, first of all, this could be a group of people could start to look into this right now, but once it's rezoned, certainly would not preclude an affordable housing development coming in there,
No,
right?
I think that's kind of the way I looked at it, Tom, was this is, you know, if we can get New York State to say, I'll give you $50 million to build 80 affordable and workforce housing, fantastic. If that dries up, and to me, you know, New York is teetering on bankruptcy. Who knows what the federal government's going to do with helping us? Maybe it'll be better, maybe it won't. So to me, I say, okay, let's say if someone said tomorrow we want to come build, you know, 80 beautiful units, fantastic. You know, let them do it. If that doesn't happen, I would like to say, you know, what's commercially viable, and that's what we're trying to do here. So
Yeah.
Commercially viable without incentive.
without without government money, so to me, like if or limited government money. So if you got say 70 units or say 60 units on one of the properties, 6 would be the traditional affordable. That's why we say, well, 6, if we can get that to 12 with some more workforce housing, and it becomes more viable because they can make a little money on that, and that's the break even we heard was about 120%.
Yeah. So yeah, no, look, I'm the first one who would not advocate for throwing the baby out with the bathwater here. And if that's what we can get, 6 units, 12 units, 30 units,
Right.
15 units, however many units would better than 0, right? So I'm not going to suggest for a second, well, if you can't just do affordable housing, then just forget about all of this and just get single family houses in there. So no, I would not suggest that for 1 second. But I would, in terms of the number that came across the transom of 120 to 150% of AMI for kind of quote moderate income, I would be interested in kind of where that number comes from, and what the developer who provided that number, or maybe there were many developers who provided that number. But I mean, it strikes me that the units that are going to be built are going to be very, very expensive units if they are looking at getting, a density bonus for 120 to 150% of AMI, just based on, my back of the envelope calculating, which was really just throwing something onto the CNN site on the internet to see if I made $150,000, what kind of house would a bank allow me to afford, So, and that's the number that came out. And that, of course, doesn't take into account HOA. So that, number would probably go down, but, or HOA fees. But regardless,
for a ballpark,
what?
For a ballpark, it's probably not.
Yeah. So that kind of just stuck out and concerned me a little bit. And I thought, boy, really, we're not able to do a little bit better than that, because that really, would not by itself add very much to the economic diversity of the community.
Yeah, and I think somewhat of that number was kind of a starting place. I think that, I think 120 was the pivot point where if it's less than 120, they basically lose money on those units as well. If it's more than 120, they potentially make money and, offset some of the losses on the other properties.
Right.
And, I don't think, at least I'm speaking for myself here, I don't think that number was set in stone in my mind. If that was going to be 125, if it was going to be 130, whatever it was going to be, we could tweak that, and I think when we looked at it and I think we thought, the 120 was about 750,000, but 840, whatever, whatever that number is, like how many houses have been built in Irvington that are, less than $1 million in the last 20 years, 0, so it's kind of it's a funny thing. It sounds ridiculous to say that, a semi-affordable unit in Irvington's 850,000 or 750,000, wherever you want the number to come out.
Yeah.
But
that's what it is.
There's just nothing being built for that. I mean, we were lucky that we have the co-ops that are, 350,000 or so, but even 350,000 now, it seems high to me, when you just hear the number, but it's, it's become our reality.
Mm-hmm.
Mary Anderson?
Yeah, I'm confused. Tom, were you doing that calculation assuming that these units would be condos, would be owned?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, because I don't know about the board, but I was thinking more in terms of rentals. And in fact, apparently that's what there's a big market now for, which we've heard from different people, is rental. So I think people were looking a little bit more on monthly rent.
Yeah.
Would come out to in monthly rent.
But still the same, regardless of if it's a purchase or a rental, in many respects, the same argument would obtain, I think. Which is
except when we did come up with the rental figures, let me see, they seemed like reasonable, compared to what we know, what our kids are paying for rent and stuff like that. It certainly seemed reasonable. Let me see if I've.
Yeah, well, I could pretty much do it in my head. I mean, if we take 30% of, 150,000, that's 45,000. So it's a little under 4,000 a month, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah, no. So if you were doing a family of, let's say a family of two, at 120% AMI,
Yeah.
their income is about, the income would be 120,000, and the rent would be 3,000, about 3,200.
Right, that makes sense. I was looking at it from the perspective of a family of four. Yeah.
Yeah, family of four, you're right. It comes to, it came to $4,000. So we had those, the board, I had calculated those numbers for the board, and those were the numbers they were,
Right.
basing it on. We never did a calculation about what that would cost, what that would mean for a co-op or a condo,
Right.
because we had heard from a couple of different people, that what the need seems to be now these days is for rental units. I think that's what the board was looking at.
Right.
But again, we don't control whether there'll be rentals
No,
or
of course not.
condos.
No.
And if they did start as rentals, I don't think anything precludes the developers to change at some point from rental to ownership, right?
Right.
That happen?
Right.
Yeah, and zoning can't control ownership forms. So, I mean, you can't say in zoning, these have to be rental apartments or they have to be condos.
Yeah, no, look, I fully 100% understand without some kind of subsidy, governmental subsidy or some very wealthy individual saying that they wanted to pop 50 million bucks or something. I mean, it's not happening. And all I'm suggesting is that if we have the political will, or if the board has the political will and the inclination, that it might be a good thing to investigate. And I'd be happy to do research into where all these funding streams came for the Peekskill development and some of the other developments in the county. And I know that a former member of the housing committee would probably join me in that endeavor, but I can't speak for him. But in any case, that's all I have to say. I mean, I think it's great that it's going to be zoned for multifamily, and I think that if we can kind of explore different possibilities for what it might mean to have places that are truly affordable, and I sent this to Brian, and I don't have the figures in front of me, but you can kind of do the math in your head. I mean, somebody making $50 an hour, which is not nothing these days, given that the federal minimum wage is about a sixth or seventh of that. They wouldn't be able to, get into one of those places. So yeah, I mean, that's a little over 100,000 a year, right? That's all I'm saying. And somebody working at the dry cleaning place or Jordan's is, even if there is a couple, they're not probably making anywhere near that. So that's my concern.
Yep. No, I think it reiterates what a difficult issue this is and how hard it is. And I don't think it's solved by zoning alone, so I think that, however we end up zoning this, assuming there's multifamily involved, I think there's going to be a lot of additional work if we want to try to do something that's going to be, more than kind of the minimum required. Because again, typically affordable is not the most profitable use for property. And we know that these properties are fairly expensive. So, so I think we're going to have to be creative, even with the rezoning. I still think the question's somewhat open on the workforce side of it and what that percentage is, where we find that right balance. And I would ask if the housing committee could, kind of look at some best practices in other communities for that, and maybe come back to us with a recommendation, because we did do some back of the envelope math as well. But, you know, I don't, in my opinion anyway, that was not a hard and fast number. So, you know, we definitely could use some guidance on that.
I remember, Tom, I'm glad you brought up that Peekskill project. As I recall, the first time I learned anything about that, I'm pretty sure it was through reading the consolidated funding applications that were awarded in our Hudson Valley region. And I saw, wow, Peekskill. Boy, they got this. There was a whole slew of things together. As I recall, it was, and that must be the same thing you're talking about when you're talking about this
Yep.
major project in Peekskill.
Karen, is your hand up?
Yes, I just wanted to say something more about, well, you'll all understand why there was no consensus reached among those of us on the committee, but I am really wary of any comparisons to Peekskill, because obviously a lot of government aid of any kind depends on, well, they put it in infrastructure for one thing, and particularly they target areas that need economic development. And Irvington is not in that category about economic development. So I have great concerns about comparing this particular property with any other in other communities, because I would think that any kind of governmental assistance would be very, very difficult for Irvington to qualify for.
But you know, Karen, in terms of the 750 units that were mandated to be built, many of them were built in communities not unlike this, right?
The 750 you're talking about?
Yeah, yeah.
But you're talking about the settlement agreement, right?
Yeah. No, I'm just saying
that's
right.
That's beside the point. That's.
I don't think many of those got federal funding, certainly, maybe not even New York State. I mean, the county was certainly encouraging those various projects. Most of them were very small, I think. And the point of the settlement was specifically to get housing built in communities like this.
Right. That's what that was the point that I was trying to make. And
But that was not a federal lawsuit. It was in the federal court, but it was brought by an individual and an individual group. And that's quite different. Right.
No, I know that. I know that. I mean, the only thing I would add, and then I'll be quiet, is that it's not as if, affordable housing should only be located in communities where there's already affordable housing, and I think that people at all levels of government would agree about that one of the ideas is to integrate affordable housing into communities where there's very, very little, because the research has shown that kids of families who live in communities with people of higher income, even if they're not integrated into the exact same housing complex or whatever, that they have a better chance, in life. So that's it.
Well, if these were all developed as multifamily, set aside the moderate income, you are going to get a chunk of affordable units. Not a huge number, but if it for, let's say two of them are developable at about 68 units, you get 14 from it. Assuming they all went to multifamily, when they're not going to, you get 14, and from the other you get 2 each, 60. Maybe you get 18 if they were built out. I mean, which isn't a huge number, but it's
for Irvington. It is.
Look, it's absolutely.
So that's the other thing about multifamily. What's not lost here is you're still going to have the affordable set aside. So you will get those too.
Right. No, I recognize that.
Family, you're not going to get that.
Right. No, I totally recognize that, and I think that's important.
And also, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that simply by building more multifamily that really has a higher density factor, by adding to the supply of housing in the village, and hopefully the remaining units that are not mandated under the FAH requirement or under the density bonus will not be stratospherically expensive. They won't be, you know, ultra luxury units. They will be multifamily rental units at whatever the market rate is, but simply by providing more of them than we have, I think will improve the situation of housing in Irvington.
But,
You know,
but
it
that's,
just gives
that's
people
part of
more
the
options.
challenge. But that's part of the challenge that the board encountered when they did start talking about multifamily, is that if you leave it to the market, what you will get, and I don't know that stratospheric is the right word, but you used it. You know, what you will get are very expensive market rate units.
As high as the market will allow is what you're.
Exactly. And I'm not sure, I mean, unless there's some other proof otherwise, that's what's going to happen here. And so the view here in the balancing act, and you know, this is all a balance, is, you know, you have mandated affordable units, and the rest, absent anything else, the rest will be luxury, or whatever word you want to use. And
Whatever a $1.8 million townhouse is called.
Right.
whatever you want to call
Yeah.
it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be affordable to someone making 120% of AMI. So, you know, so the idea was to have some way without, I mean, you can't mandate 20 and 30 and 40% affordable. That the economics would never work. I think you know that. So it was to come up with a balancing act. So, you know, what those numbers are, and listen, this is the type of feedback that I know the board was looking for in terms of that word moderate. You know, it has different connotations, and we happen to put a certain definition on it with this draft, but that can change. And I think this is helpful to hear the feedback. How much it can change, again, is a balancing act. You know, we can't say moderate is 90% and say, and demand that they all be
Yeah,
moderate.
no,
You know, the equation just doesn't work at some point. So
Yeah. But I also don't think it precludes anything. You know, if we did find someone that was willing to develop it, you know, all at 80% or all at 60%, you know, I don't think anything in the zoning precludes it. In fact, it allows it, which it doesn't allow it now. You know,
exactly. Yeah.
a lot more
Right.
density than what you would have been looking at before. So.
You know, and it's possible that there is money available to offset the land costs, which are, of course, the real stumbling block in Irvington. And with that type of money comes a trade-off in terms of having to offer additional either affordable housing or affordable units, or capping, you know, the market rates of the entire complex. I mean, I don't know what's available, but it's certainly has been done before and in other places. So it would be worth looking into, but that doesn't go into the zoning, obviously,
right.
but it's not impossible.
And maybe there should be a different level of bonus for truly affordable units. So in other words, if someone is coming in at a higher unit count for the actual affordable units because they have subsidies or whatever other approach they're taking, maybe there can be some sort of a density bonus for that. I don't know. We hadn't talked about that as a board, and I'm not suggesting that they agree with that.
One thing I've seen in some other communities to make the affordable housing proposals work better is reducing the parking space requirement for affordable units, on the assumption that affordable unit dwellers will not have necessarily 2 or 2.1 cars per unit. So I can possibly find exactly what was done. I mean, this is just something I read a while ago, but there are other ways to perhaps increase, because the parking is obviously a big factor in the density, and people are always afraid of all these additional cars that are going to be arriving in town. But if you can limit the number of cars, then maybe people won't have as big a problem with density, the number of people. It's not the people, it's the cars. So.
But that's a problem. That's a problem right now in Half Moon, which is considered affordable, and it is affordable for comparison purposes. But the planning originally was only for 1.5 cars per unit. And obviously we've exceeded that long ago, even though we're close to the train stations and, well, not
You're right.
too close.
Very
And
walkable.
not too close to public transportation. But anyway, we still have exceeded that 1.5 cars.
And is that designated parking, like in the garages and parking lots, there's enough spaces for 1.5 cars per unit? Or did that
No, it
include street?
includes on-street parking also.
Yeah, well, the off-street parking requirement in this draft law is 1.5 per unit, Deb.
Pardon me?
It's not,
Right.
it's not 2 or 2.1. The affordable, the parking, off-street parking requirement on this is 1.5 per unit.
Is that typical village zoning for multifamily, or
Yes.
is that
Well,
lower?
it's in this law, but I think that's what it is otherwise in the law as well. But I mean, but that I'm sure came in after Half Moon was developed.
Right.
Right.
There was a suggestion at one point. I know we had a conversation with a planner, and it might have even been with a county planner that I had. But there was a suggestion that, you know, in order to limit unit sizes and therefore value of the units, that you might be able to do that with parking. In other words, as you said, Deb, lower the parking limits, not so much requirements, but limit the parking as opposed to have minimums.
And in those spots, there's not many alternatives for
Yeah,
parking.
I mean, we looked at it, and I think, you know, not that everyone rejected the idea, but I don't think it had very many legs. But it probably is not out of the question to look at.
I mean, Leola, I think it was mentioning that at the meeting when you first introduced this zoning proposal, and saying how, you know, younger people make it appealing to younger people who don't necessarily want to have 2 cars, and they don't need huge apartments, and they want, you know, livable, walkable, bikeable spaces. Just kind of a different approach to what we've seen in the past. But, you know, other communities are doing it. So,
Well, I think our consultant did say that those were the kinds of people who were looking at the newer rentals coming,
Yeah.
you know, from outside the immediate area. It really is younger people who then would move up to other type of housing as they, you know, grew into families and
got that second car.
Yeah.
That they
But
couldn't
traded
afford.
their
Child,
bike for a
second
second
car.
car.
4 or 5.
Down the rabbit hole. Yeah, so, but I think we're definitely going in the right direction. And I think taking the single family option out is huge.
Well, I think we, you know, obviously we really appreciate your feedback so far. You know, we look forward to, you know, more feedback as we go. You know, yeah. When were you having another public hearing on Monday, Larry?
I mean, the public hearing's still open.
Still open. So I think it's going to be on the agenda again Monday. Don't think you're probably going to do a lot of research over the weekend, but you know, we're not voting on Monday, so you know, we have some time. And if you guys think, you know, there's a lot more information you need, let us know. And you know, it's you know, I think depending on what feedback we get Monday, you know, we'll see where we're going. But you know, I think it is, Karen, as you mentioned, a very streamlined proposal from the first one. There's a lot less uses. I mean, when you look at the revised law now, it's mostly just crossouts. But you know, I'm hoping that it'll be easier for people to understand and get up to speed with, because we have been talking about this for a long time now. There was a pause, but you know, it's hopefully easier to understand, and hopefully we'll get some more feedback. I know one of the property owners wants to talk to us, so we can do that at the next meeting. But it's you know, there is still time left. So if you have more ideas, we're wide open to them. So
I was also
So
wondering if it's possible to, I know the whole assisted living section has been taken out, but there clearly is demand for senior housing in Irvington. And I was wondering if there's any possibility of provisions for independent senior living, but senior living such that it's built with elevators and, ADA standardized bathrooms,
Yeah.
just
Maybe-
housing that's aiming at,
You can look at a bonus for, kind of I mean, because again, I think senior living also won't have an impact on schools and probably less transportation and less cars.
Mhm.
So maybe that's something else we could look to give bonuses for is senior housing.
yeah, kind of independent living units with, minimal support, but something
Yeah.
that would,
I did, after one of our discussions, I, started Googling across Westchester. I think I asked Mary Ann, was it legal or not legal to restrict age?
age restriction.
And I think it was okay, and it still can be done. And I was looking for units that had been built in Westchester that met that criteria, and I didn't find many. But I did find some. I could go back and find what I found, because I thought too that lowers the probably the use of cars, lowers traffic going out at 8 in the morning and 5 in the evening,
Right.
and it also. We know it's an aging population, in at least in parts of Westchester, and certainly I think Norma Drummond
Hugely.
told us that too, right? So I thought there were a lot of interesting angles to that same thing that you just brought up, but try Googling senior living multifamily developments in Westchester and see what you come up with. Not many.
There's the one in
Right.
SUNY Purchase, right? That
Yeah.
was like a whole continuum of care at SUNY Purchase or something.
Yeah, well, there was
Some on this
there's
side.
a lot of continuum of care stuff, but you've
Yeah.
already decided against that.
No,
because
no,
you
these were just simply, it was a concept that was more popular, I'm going to say 20 years ago, maybe. And I didn't see anything newly built, but I'll see what I can find and forward it to you, at least, Deborah, and you can see the same ones. I thought I'm going to go and look at these places, drive around them and see, what they have.
Right.
And
I think the big one is Heritage Hills up in Somers.
Mhm.
yeah, right. That was right. There was, I saw some smaller ones that were closer. I'm going to say maybe Ossining, maybe Croton. I can't remember, but anyway, enough on that. But I had the same thought.
Oh,
Yeah.
that would be nice to see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Would it be unreasonable to ask if you could put together a couple paragraphs about this to submit to the public before the next hearing, so that it would be just a brief explanation of the change that has been made or is proposed to be made, I should say. Because again, I think there's so much misunderstanding and lack of understanding about what is being proposed. And as soon as you say affordable units, I mean, everybody's hackles go up anyway. So I just thought it might be beneficial if people understood why this is being proposed.
Kind of an executive summary.
An executive summary, exactly.
You can do that.
Yeah, I see. I don't see why not.
It also wouldn't be inappropriate, I don't think, to include some of the statistics from the housing needs assessment that just show what a huge gap there is in terms of affordability at different income levels and how high the income levels are who still cannot afford to live in Irvington at the median sales and rental prices. I mean, we have rental apartments, but they're very few and far between, I think. But the housing needs assessment did have statistics on the gap between what was affordable to people earning sort of the median income in Westchester County and what was affordable, what was being offered in Irvington. So, for example, the affordability gap for a median priced home in Irvington, which was at the time $1,225,000. So for somebody earning 80, well, at 100% of the AMI, the gap was $924,000, actually $925,000. So that's fairly substantial. And in terms of rentals, they had pegged a countywide 2-bedroom at renting at about $2,500 a month.
Mhm.
And the annual wage to afford that would be about $100,000 a year or $48 an hour.
Mhm.
But the hourly wages, I think this was in Irvington, the average hourly wage was $15.83, which I don't know where they get that number. That seemed very, very low, but that's what they had.
Mhm.
And somebody earning that could afford a monthly rental of $828.
Ooh.
So the gap between the market rent and what people earning that could afford is $1,670 a month. I mean, it's huge. And they would have to work 120 and a half hours a week in order to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in Irvington at the market rate. So, I mean, those numbers to me are fairly staggering.
Mhm.
But, and there were so many numbers in the housing needs assessment, and there's a lot of numbers that get thrown around. But I think if we could pull out some of the most germane numbers and just highlight those, people will better understand,
Mhm.
what we're talking about in terms of affordable units, who needs them, how many people need them. So many people need them. That we're not talking, poverty level,
Mhm.
unemployed people who are, in Section 8 housing, whatever. It's just the gap in Irvington is just huge.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, I think
it
that
really
is,
needs to be addressed.
I think that is the biggest challenge of the Irvington Housing Committee, is to express that affordable housing is not Section 8. That seems to be a real hard concept for people to understand. And I think that's just a big piece of education that needs to happen. And I think it would be helpful. I know that we've talked about it, or I've talked about it on the committee, and we know that education needs to happen, but it would be helpful if we had the board helping out, supporting us, sort of being the wind in our sails as far as being able to explain that.
Yeah, I mean, if we could provide the information, but you guys could be the people who are disseminating it among the community members. Or if we could even just brainstorm what the best way is to get that information out to people.
One of the challenges we find over and over and over again is getting people to look at, read, think about information we try to disseminate. So this happens
Zoning proposal?
over and over.
They're rezoning my neighborhood?
Yeah.
We send out multiple pieces of information, and then we get to something then gets on the agenda for a board meeting, and the reaction is generally, you never told me. So we would be happy to brainstorm with you about how to effectively communicate.
Yeah, I've seen it happen a lot.
Hear from people when they decide whatever they think they heard, they don't want. So how to get effective communication so that people understand what exactly it is we're talking about, what the goals are, and what we are specifically considering. Absolutely.
I was thinking maybe we could use our website more to have information such as this available. But again, people have to go looking for it. It's not,
Right.
it's only for those who are already interested.
When the last time Norma Drummond came, she gave, I'm going to say it was maybe a 10-minute presentation with a lot of the highlights of some of the figures I think that you're mentioning. I think that was recorded.
Yeah, well, that's the same source.
Right, right. If that would help, I mean, it's probably been on in our channel, but maybe it could be focused on, and we could see if you watch that and see if you think, oh, that hits a lot of the things that I was hoping to hit, maybe that would be helpful to somehow
Right.
project it as, hey, here's something you might really want to watch.
Yeah, well, listening to Norma is what, kind of gave me the idea. And then I had to go back and look at it because there was a lot of numbers coming out of Norma that night. I mean, it was a lot of information. But I think it really is in the means of communication and really making it as part of maybe this executive summary, of why we're doing it and who needs it. But again, that's not going to happen by Monday, clearly. So I don't know if you want to clutter up whatever is done for Monday with more information. But I don't think people understand what it is we're trying to achieve.
No, definitely not.
So. Larry, our website or our page on the village's website, we have 2 pages, I think. One is fairly up to date, one is not. At least last time I looked, which was months ago. Is there a way that we can work on that? Should I speak to?
Yeah, absolutely. No, either between me or my assistant Karen, we can make sure that things are updated. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just thinking there's more we could put there, and then maybe we could direct people there. Right now, we don't want to direct people there. Okay.
Good.
I think that there was one other question. Well, there was 2 questions. Tom asked if we could still see him. We can.
Oh, yeah, no, I was, for some reason I disappeared, but now Larry invited me back in.
Oh, okay. So Larry kicked you off and then let you back in. I see.
Yeah.
You were thinking bad thoughts, so we had to kick you off.
The other, we had another question about affordable multifamily housing raising property taxes. I think there's a little misperception there as well. If things convert to condo, it raises the taxes on other people, but this would be a complete additive to the community. So if they built a bunch of housing, it wouldn't actually cost other people more because it would just increase the size of the pie. When people convert from condo, they actually pay a less smaller portion of the pie, so it distributes to everybody else. So this is a different issue. It's not going to make other people pay more. This is going to actually, it would just be more revenue for the village, the schools, and the town and county. And it's still, I also don't think that commercial properties necessarily pay more in taxes than non-commercial properties. So it's, I think the nice thing about commercial properties is they obviously don't have a drain on the school, but we also don't think this will have a large drain on the school either, especially if it's senior housing or that type of thing. So, but that's another thing that I think we have to get that out there, because I think there is confusion about when things convert to, condos, like the Landing is talking about in Dobbs Ferry, that has a big impact on the other property owners.
Oh, yeah.
But even if these start out as condos, like our friends at Marker Ridge are going to, it's not going to affect the other property owners because it was never in the pie to get smaller. It's just going to create a bigger pie overall. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, Larry, and Brenda's not here to correct me, but that's my understanding.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, again, thank you guys for all your hard work. Please continue. We'll make sure that we anytime we have even a rough draft, we'll make sure to include you guys, but
Thank you.
going forward, but please continue to come up with ideas. This is a helpful conversation for sure.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you for having us.
Right. Again, I just want to thank the entire committee for their dedication, and contrary to how it sounds about not reaching consensus, everyone did, listen to everyone else with respect. And I think it was important for everyone to be heard tonight.
Thank you.
I think so too.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good
So
night.
now we are going to get kicked off, but we can continue to watch, right?
Yes.
Watch this.
Oh, okay.
You don't have to,
We're no
but you
longer up
can.
there.
Only if you behave, right? I'm going to put you back as attendees as opposed to
Okay.
panelists. So
Thank
Okay.
you all.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good night.
The next item up for discussion is the discussion of public access to Matheson Park. This is something we've obviously started talking about. I can't even keep track. 18 months ago, 2 years ago. I don't know. It was, we've talked about it many times over the years. I think we were kind of talking about it regularly, and then Matheson Park was closing, and then we have the pandemic. So, it kind of got backburnered a little bit. But I think we're bringing it back to the front burner now, as we kind of gear up to see, how the board feels as a group. And if we want to do something for 2021, which is right around the corner, we have to kind of figure out any budgetary implications, things like that. So, the time is right to kind of have this discussion again. I don't know if anybody wants to lead off. I don't know if Larry, you want to lead off as kind of, our RPAC representative, but, we can all kind of, I figured tonight's discussion is really kind of, updating everyone on our personal opinions on this and where we need to go from here.
Sure. I mean, I would just say I've been nudging Larry about this probably for the last 2 months, just trying to get, it back on the agenda. I know RPAC has been thinking and talking about it, and I am scheduled to meet with them, I think, next week, and I think they would love to get some guidance and some public comment as to what the board would like to aim for. And I'm sure RPAC would like to work with that as well.
Okay. I mean, I'll be happy to start with my feelings. I've said for a long time, I think that the park can handle it. I don't think it was ever overcrowded with, residents. When we found out that the deed did not restrict use, to me, that really opened it up it opened it up for discussion. I got to be careful with my words there, but it allowed us to have an intelligent discussion about what we think should happen there. Again, I think for, to me, this isn't really a righting a wrong type of thing. I think it was more understanding that there was a misunderstanding about the deed, and now saying, well, what's right for Irvington? And frankly, I think that having an unbelievable waterfront park that's going to now have an unbelievable new playground and a splash pad and all that kind of stuff, I'm happy to share that with the world. To me, parks are to be used. I don't think that our park was overused. I do think we'll probably get an uptick in resident usage when we open up the new playground and things. But I still think that even with a large increase of residential use, we still have plenty of room and we can share that park. Additionally, to me, grant money, there's still, although we just did a large renovation, the bathrooms need to be renovated. I'd love to see a stage there, maybe even a dog park someday, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. But, I think there's a lot more that can be done in that park to make it an even greater park than it is. The one thing that it already has, obviously, is the location, and the setting is just, to me, unbelievable. And it's such a special place to me. And I'd love to share that with people. I think, the consensus seems to be the school district's a no-brainer. I agree with that. And then, to me, beyond that, how do we open it up to the public? And I think that that's a little bit of a question, because we have heard negatives about other places that have opened it up. We've also heard great success stories of places that are open to the public and always have been, and they don't have any issues. We have issues potentially with not enough parking, but I think that also is kind of a limiting factor. You can't have too many people if they don't have, or you probably won't have too many people if they can't park. I don't envision a lot of people taking the train to a park, because if you're taking the train, that means that you're willing to travel just about anywhere, and there's a lot of places to travel, so it's not as special to me. So I discount that concern a little bit, but I don't discount the concerns altogether, and I think that making a change after 80 plus years is not going to be something that's easy. I know not everyone's for this change, and a lot of people say, Scenic Hudson's open to everybody, and it is. And, for the most part, we haven't had a lot of problems in Scenic. Most of our problems in Scenic Hudson Park recently are directly pandemic related, whether it's, people not wearing masks and we have to have a police officer there all the time to say, put your mask on, because they don't listen to the rec department, or just, a lot of parks being closed and it's one of the few that's open. So I think we've had, heavy usage, but at the same time, we've managed that heavy usage. The park still looks great with, our parks department does an unbelievable job. And they do a great job managing the resources there. It's a different park, but they do have things like fields and things like that. And again, I think they do a tremendous job managing that. So, personally, I would like to see, a little more research. I'd like to look at, maybe, I know there was a list put together of parks that have similar facilities. If we can look at a, half dozen of those, hopefully find some that it's going great, some it's not going well, and find out what they did wrong. But I think with the proper management and the proper technology, we can, manage opening the park. What that looks like, I don't know. Right now, I think we have to do some more research. If we still have to maintain permits to control it for the next few years, while we kind of, reopen and see what's happening, especially with all the new equipment and the splash pad and all that kind of stuff. That, I'm open to that, but I think I'm definitely 100% for moving towards opening Matheson Park, doing it intelligently and managing it intelligently with our partners in RPAC and the rec department and the police department. And I do think we have to figure out how much this is going to cost, because I think that's part of the equation for sure. I have my ideas, but my ideas are, are not very well educated. So I think we need more, that's where the research comes in. That's where our experts come in. But that's where I stand. I would like to, push to get that research and get more information for us for budget season. It's going to cost something to open it up to the public. What that number is and how that affects our budget, that's what we need to find out, in my opinion. So I will cede my time to everyone else.
Well, I think that's very well said. I think the part, especially about, getting information from parks that are similar. Nothing's going to be exactly the same, but there are certainly enough parks that are on the Hudson. There are enough parks that offer the types of amenities that we have, and to see how they're run. And I think it's important to get input from perhaps even more than one group from within the same village. A perfect example of this is just today in my office. I had someone who is part of the Friends of the Waterfront Park in Dobbs Ferry. So I had her in my chair. So I said, what do you think about what's going on? And I heard from her, and about 2 months earlier, I had a trustee from Dobbs Ferry in, and a totally different view, and I'm sure if you speak to the Parks and Rec person there, you'd probably get a different view as well. So I think we need more than one input from, each person, perhaps, not just a board member, not just a RPAC member, a rec member, but a combination of things to find out about, on the ground issues and problems. Is usage much greater on weekends? What type of coverage do they have? Because we do need to get an idea of what this cost is going to be. But in general, I agree with everything Brian said.
Okay, well, I'll take a turn. I've thought about this a long time, and I've felt for a long time that there's an important message to send to people that grow up here, as well as people who visit here, people who work here, that we are a welcoming community. And I certainly think that our parks should reflect that that general sense of welcoming. I know when we left this discussion the last time, there seemed to be a sense that we needed an interim period where I'm trying to remember, I think this came from RPAC, that they were proposing that it needed to be just increasing usage to the school district. I right now, that doesn't seem like it's a necessary step, because I think what I've seen, and partly reflects what Mayor Smith was talking about, I've seen our PAC and our police department handle things very, very well under the new usage in Scenic Hudson based on the pandemic, essentially. And I also noted that now the rec department, and Larry, you and others, and they can fill me in, have this online registration. I had been, when I was looking into this, how long ago was it? Seems like years and years ago, when I was looking into what the county parks do for online registration of what you might call scarce resources, pavilions with tables, with barbecues. And I just looked, I think it was yesterday when I knew we were going to discuss this. Because of the pandemic, I think they've shut down that whole online registration because there's not much use of those kinds of things. But when I looked at it before, I found it seemed very practical. I mean, there were 10 barbecue things. You signed up, if it was something that had a fee, you paid the fee. And it seemed like, kind of first come, first serve. So there might be a little more to it, but given the technology that is not so costly in time for the rec department, I think we've moved to an easier place to be able to do in practice what, to me is an important ethical, moral stance. But I agree that, getting lots of opinions is definitely important. This is just me speaking as me. But I'd like to see us move forward. I think people who have a different point of view, I think it's very dangerous to assign motive to them. I think there are very well-meaning people who take a different position than I happen to. If members of our board here take a different position, I don't judge anybody for not particularly seeing it exactly my way, is what I'm saying. But I'm glad we're bringing it up. I used that park starting in 1978 when I had toddlers, when the old playground equipment was there, and it wasn't heavily used even in those days, at least during the day for young moms who were down there. I'd love to take a tour of the park. I mean, I've peeked in over the edge, over these last couple of months, but I'm sure it's going to be a wonderful resource. And, you put parameters, if there's a safety limit to how many people can be in that park at one time, I guess you say that. I mean, this park can't have more than X number of people. But I think it's an advantage to kids to grow up here, to have more experience with more kids who might not happen to, just go to school with them. So I think it's a win-win, but I understand people's concerns, and I certainly hope they have an opportunity to speak and be heard.
Here's where I'm giving this a lot of thought, obviously, and I'm very happy that we are not required to keep the park closed, because that's how I think all of us, when we first came on this board, that was our assumption. I certainly was turned away from Matheson Park when we first moved here. We lived in East Irvington, and I was quite amazed that I was there with my kids and couldn't go into the park. So no way am I suggesting we should, keep it closed or try to not open it, nothing of the kind. On the other hand, I think Matheson Park is distinctly different from Scenic Hudson, and there's a tradition of a kind of park use, especially because of the barbecue pits, especially because people do reserve it for different kinds of social gatherings, family get-togethers, one solution obviously is to take out the barbecue pits, then you don't have that problem, but I don't know, maybe that's the best solution. But I do think this is, you hear the word balance a lot. We talked about that before. I think we have to balance how to be as open and welcoming as possible with how to keep, not create a situation where the park becomes so crowded on weekends that, you know, the taxpayers who pay for it, the taxpayers who just footed the bill for the refurbishment of this park are limited in their access, or find that they can't have their annual get together because we had to take out the barbecue pits in order to control usage of the park. I'm not saying that will necessarily happen, but I would really like us to approach this with some caution and have a gradual expansion. And I hope, and my expectation would be that at the end of the day, we can say, great, this is going to work just fine. Everybody's welcome. But we just had a meeting with the Housing Committee, right? And they were talking about the importance of more modest housing, more moderate means, more lower income housing in Irvington. If we are building more housing units, those folks by definition are not going to have acres of lawn and a private pool. So we do, I think, have some obligation to make sure that we're balancing how we open it and the way in which we open it to maintain the maximum benefit for everybody. So I would just, going along with what Brian and Larry previously said, I would like to see us approach this with a goal in mind of opening the park with as little restriction as possible. But let's get our information first, and let's have a transition period where we can do this with some understanding of what we're doing and some ability to open it. It's much easier to open it gradually than to throw it wide open and then have to pull back. That's really a terrible situation. So let's by all means, let's start as soon as we can to do it gradually.
I guess I'm last. I think everyone has good points and various degrees of speed. I'm more on the level of wanting to go, quickly. I don't see there should be limits in the beginning, except in terms of where we can think about, as Connie was saying, resource management. What kind of resources are going to most likely be, based on our study of other parks, going to be under the most pressure? And obviously, the grills. We don't have any covered areas, so that we have a limited amount of controlled resources. And then there's the thing about larger groups. So certainly I think that larger groups probably need to remain permitted ahead of time. Otherwise, there's a real issue in terms of public safety. Beyond that, though, I think that there's only going to be, I don't even think it's going to be every weekend. I think it's going to be seasonally. It's going to be the summer weekends where the park is pressured the most. So if we're opening up the park in the spring, we certainly have a period to watch what kind of usage as it ramps up. And if we do have to make adjustments, I'm not sure where that goes, but I'm really not in favor of having park permits for the community, and then some kind of what was once suggested, kind of a lottery of a pool of park permits for non-community members. I don't think we should be approaching it that way.
Great. Well, obviously I don't want to cut anybody short, but so Larry Lonke, do you have? I think we have a fairly clear picture for you to report back to our friends at RPAC.
Yes, I believe the meeting is next week. I think it's Wednesday of next week, and I'll, if they haven't been watching, I'll make sure they hear, our viewpoints. I will get, specific questions that they may have about things, specific items in terms of rules or in terms of resources. And I think, the burden of research, I think, really should be shared. I don't think it should all be assigned to RPAC to do. I think some of this should be us. Um, I think that way the input and the research can be, a little more objective perhaps, and not be viewed as subjective as, any one person or one group with a point of view that they want to.
I think that's a really good suggestion. We did very well with leaf blowers taking that approach. People together who had different perspectives and different sources of information. So yes, I would agree. Not just have it representatives, but from our back certainly, but maybe eventually get to a smaller working group to make specific recommendations.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I'll report back.
Great.
And then just before we get off this topic, we have all this summary data from other parks around the county, which I know I've totally forgotten about because I haven't looked at it in so long. So the question is just, what do we do to absorb that?
Maybe
is that how we?
Maybe what we can do is we can have Larry Schaffler shoot it to us again, and we can maybe look at a half dozen or whatever number we think makes sense. If it's 3 or if it's 20, that seems similar and seem like they would be interesting, and that we can kind of reach out to different contacts. I think what Larry Lonke said is correct. Just talking about Dobbs Ferry alone, the view of the police department is different than the rec department, than the new mayor, than the old mayor. So, it's, I think you have to get, we probably have to talk to multiple people in multiple jurisdictions to kind of get a real sense of what is and isn't working. So, to me, that's, maybe Larry, if you could shoot that around again, we can take a look and then come to some kind of consensus that, these 5 look, probably most relevant to us, or something like that.
Right. I think that summary really didn't have answers. It just had comparisons to find
Correct.
sort of amenities, locations, and perhaps acreage, but not to say that they were successful or not successful. So
Right.
that's our job.
That's totally right.
Work on.
I didn't do any analysis of it, to say, well, this one is a good comparison and this one isn't. It's really very, very raw information, and so.
But it can serve as a starting point for us.
Yeah.
The things that I would be really interested in comparing are the different kinds of online registration procedures. I played around with the one that we have now in Irvington, and I had to say whether I had toddlers or youth. I didn't have either, so I had to, but I get the idea that this is a long way from, you have to walk in and you have to, have one of our wonderful employees, help you personally and take things out. It's an efficient way, and the county one let you see a map of the 4 or 5 places, and you go, okay, area number 1, that's the one I want to reserve. And then you would type that in, I guess. And, once it was reserved for you for that, 3 hours on that Saturday afternoon, you had a fee that you paid. And I do think there was some difference in the fees, but this whole thing is missing now from the county. It didn't show up when I tried to find it.
Can I just point one thing out? The online registration that you referred to is program registration,
Right,
which
exactly.
they use. Yeah. And so the comparable platform, not that we're settled on it necessarily,
Yes.
but the comparable platform is the platform that we use to reserve the tennis courts right now.
Okay.
That platform is working very well. I mean, there's no fees involved with that, but it's working very well, and it's very easily extendable to other facilities and resources. You could easily reserve a picnic table area in, Matheson Park if you set that up. So that platform is actually the one that works much easier. You don't have to answer anything about toddlers and youth and anything like that. that's not the right
All right,
platform.
well, since I didn't play tennis either,
Well,
I
but
never
that's
made,
why it didn't make sense to you, probably. So,
it didn't, no,
Um,
but I've never had to reserve to walk around beautiful scenic Hudson or walk a, so.
no, but I think the idea, and as
No,
you've
I
all
know,
pretty
just
much
kidding.
expressed, yeah, is those limited resources probably do need to be managed. I think what you'll find is, and part of the things that you should be looking at when you go look at other parks is not so much what is working, but also what's not working. So you may find that there's a real bad problem at a particular park, and then when you dig into it, you realize, well, they're not even trying to manage it.
Right.
It's just wide open. So therefore, that tells you that you need to manage it. You know what I mean? If you want it to work here. So it's, and part of management is obviously the reservation system for things like that, for limited resources and things like that. So I don't think the technology part of it's going to be an issue. It's really, you need to set the policy, and you need to gather,
And-
how you want to set the policy. And then I don't think the implementation is the bad part.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say the other thing was, obviously, and it's been mentioned, there's a cost in terms of manpower and that sort of resources. So, we have to get some kind of a sense of what that might be, so we can make sure it's in the budget going forward.
Right, and we have a time frame for that. So, I would think by the beginning of the year, we want to have a grip on that, right?
Yeah.
So the reason I brought up technology, well, the things that have changed over time for me is I think those technology platforms have gotten better and better. Obviously, that seems like it reduces the number of hours that you would have to give to an employee to take care of it. I mean, that's my assumption. But RPAC could fill you in on, how much it takes.
Yeah, I think
Somebody from the county could also.
the other side of the coin is like, it was great for the sign up for the tennis, but then you needed an attendant at the tennis courts to make sure you had signed up. So it's kind of a, you don't need someone in the office to sign them up, but you need someone to make sure that the person who signed up, where they didn't have someone at the tennis courts before. So it's, I think we can figure out all the management issues once we kind of figure out plans.
I think that was kind of my opening statement was, we need to understand what the scarce resources are expected to be. We need to have a management system for them. If there is some budget involved in that, to me, that is worth it, because we are expressing an important sense of who we are as a village of Irvington. And to me, that would be worth that, just personally speaking.
And I guess the other thing is, if there are controlled resources and capacity issues, then there's an issue of enforcement that has to be considered. And what does that mean?
Right. I'd like to get back to the county person who how much, once they do those barbecue pits, for example, do they have problems with enforcement, and how do they handle them? And what problems did they have with that whole procedure? But the county people seem to have changed. I'm just not sure who the right person is now, but I'm sure we can use that as part of our research.
Yep, agreed. Well, the last issue, Connie, is I'm going to turn over to you. Discussion of a plan to celebrate Madam C.J. Walker. All I'll say is we had a great call. Even if the audio quality was poor, but I thought we had an exciting call last week. But I will allow you to give the summary of the call.
All right. I wrote that in my summary to Larry. Put it up on the screen now.
I can if you want me to.
Oh, well, yeah, why not? I think it'll make it clear. I was just looking for the email, but you can find it on the page.
Okay.
When you do that, and then I'll talk around it.
Do I need to expand that a little bit? Maybe I can.
A little bigger?
Yeah, let me see what I can do here.
Okay.
Is that better?
Oh, I can read it. If I can read it, probably most people can read it. So this does go back that we've had, I'm going to say now, 3 conversations. Brian, you might want to remind me. We first had a conversation with Alilia Bundles, who is the descendant, several generations of Madam C.J. Walker. And we talked to her about what ideas she might think was appropriate. And then we also spoke now twice to representatives of the current owners of Villa Luaro and talked to them about ideas to honor the earlier owner and the creation of that house. And we had what I thought were 2 very interesting back and forth discussions. And at the end of this last one, this 3rd conversation, they came back with just somewhat of a summary of some of the things that they felt from our back and forth, things that we had suggested actually, and brought them down to, hey, we'd like to propose, if you want, this would work for us. So so those things are in this little note here: renaming part of Fargo Lane. This is something, I think we brought this up in a meeting before, Brian. We talked a little bit at a board meeting about this, but it now has a little more legs to it. And what Mr. William James, he was the one who sent us, he was one of the participants in this conference call, was that this is an idea that came from Mayor Smith. So what they liked were particular wording for a part of Fargo Lane. I don't think they have a sense of how much of Fargo Lane we would want to do. And obviously there are homeowners there to discuss this with. But they suggested either Madam C.J. Walker Way or Madam Walker Way. And as Brian pointed out, Fargo Lane has 2 entrances on Broadway. So Fargo Lane could stay Fargo Lane for part of it and perhaps go this way. So this, the second thing we talked about is related to that. If we were to have a ribbon cutting ceremony of some sort that represented that honor for Madam Walker, that changing of the name of part of Fargo Lane, that they would plan on a weekend to be up here. I assume that meant Mr. Dennis himself and some of the folks from his organization. He's now the owner of that beautiful property. So they came up with the dates of Friday, May 21st and Saturday, May 22nd. And the first part of that they suggested, well, the idea originally came from us and from Alilia Bundles, that there be a showing in the theater of a documentary called $2 and a Dream. And they also, one that I haven't seen, don't know much about, is another by the same director called Boss, the Black Experience in Business. So if that were to happen, it would be as the theater has successfully done in the past, which is to have a panel of discussion, Q&A. So it's way more than you would get if you just flipped on YouTube and watched this. And my understanding from our conversation is that they would expect that this is the weekend that Mr. Dennis is available. So he and others would be part of a panel that would be, it would be a virtual experience unless things have changed by then, which is not expected. Maybe 2 or 3 people can be on a stage, but the theater is not going to open for, crowded people in May. But We did check with Greg, and it wouldn't be a problem for that date, or it wouldn't be a problem to try to work something out for that. So then the thing that was very interesting, because as we had discussed it before, it was that Madam Walker's birthday is in December. But what this email brought up, that it was May 25th, 1919, when Madam Walker passed away at Billowaro. So they said, in addition to the historical importance, the state also allows us to avoid Memorial Day and fits into our schedule. So I guess what we wanted to do, Brian and I, it's not up to just us, to say this is a great idea. We just wanted to get input from the rest of the board about this kind of program. And also, I do know that the Historical Society is planning, at the moment, planning something in February. I don't think, one precludes the other. It wouldn't be with Mr. Dennis. So it, that doesn't seem like really a problem, but I think we should just be in coordination. And so that's the summary. And I think we're interested in the rest of the board's feeling about this.
Oh, I'm very supportive, very enthusiastic. This is a terrific proposal. Thank you for bringing it forward. One comment I would make, though, I don't think it's absolutely necessary to change a street name to like change it from Fargo Lane. There are lots of streets in Manhattan that keep their original name and then have an additional street sign underneath memorializing who is honored by that particular section of the street or whatever, just a thought. But this sounds like a terrific program.
Yeah, I agree. Makes sense. And I was thinking the exact same thing, Janice, about the dual names, especially because it makes simplifies a lot of headache in terms of residents having to change their, legal address and stuff like that. Or I should say, not having to change their legal address.
Right.
Yeah, but the way I thought of that is, like, to me, that's always, it always seems like a little less of a celebration than actually naming it after something, renaming it than an actual rename. And I think because there's only 4 houses between Fargo on Broadway and Meadow, it's not that great in a position, but we can definitely discuss that as we get closer. But to me, it's a complete honor if it's actually renamed for them, where to me, it's like, it's nice if it's not, it always seems a little lesser to me when it's not a full rename, but then it's not my house being renamed or my street, so.
Well, I also agree with the concept. I'd be open to discussion about whether it's a dual name or a single name. I guess I'd want to know more details about where it ends and how, directions and are given and what's involved in legally changing a street name. But both of these concepts is something I fully support.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's the kind of feedback we wanted. And so I think we can, and I think we can answer this Will's email to us and just say, it looks like a plan that could work in concept and that there are some details to work out. But Marianne, you did tell us, I remember when we asked about this, that it's allowed in Irvington to change the name of a street, right?
Yeah, you can change the name of the street, but I did point out to you that for the people whose addresses are being changed, it's a pretty big burden. I mean, you just think about, like, when your credit card, you get a new credit card, all those changes you have to make, it would be this times 10. You have to file new legal documents. I mean, your deed. I mean, anything filed. It's not a small deal.
Right. Yeah. No, I fully.
You really would need to. I wouldn't. I wouldn't recommend doing it without getting a buy-in from.
Oh, of course.
All of those people, and let them realize it. And I had also made that suggestion about you could have the double sign, but I understand what you mean. You know, it isn't the same as renaming the street.
And I think when I did like
Have you
my,
talked at all to the people that live there?
well, it was funny because when I quickly looked at the way, say, New York City does it. If you want a street name change, you have to get 75% of the residents to agree. So that would be 3 out of 4 of the houses on the part that I'm talking about. So to me, we'd have to reach out to them, and if they're for it, great. But to me, it's like you don't have a big margin for error. If 2 people say no, you're out. And then I think we could do the other, kind of the sign under the sign. Especially because it's way, which sounds good with Walker. It sounds a little better if it is just the secondary name of a sign. Like Madam Walker Way on Fargo Lane is not so bad if it's just, if it was Madam Walker Street on Fargo Lane, it sounds kind of funny, but so it's not a bad backup plan, but we're definitely, now that the board seems on board, we can reach out to those homeowners. One of them is relatively new. It's a new house that was just built, that modern house. So I don't think I know any of the people there, but we can definitely reach out and see what they think.
Right. Well, that's great. And also to those in the Historical Society who are planning something, I'll just reach out to them and make sure they see what is tentatively planned. And what they do in February can be a nice buildup. It certainly wouldn't be the same, and it would, just draw more attention. I think that it's interesting that year, 1919. It's not 100 years in 2021, but it's pretty close. So. All right, very good. That's was very happy that Brian and I and Larry on the first 2 calls could get a feel for this. It seems like a very appropriate and wonderful thing to be doing. So that's it.
I will go ahead and make a motion to adjourn if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And Larry, we have a different login. Is that right?
Yes, you do. Yeah, that you should all have that link. Okay.
So we leave and come back, right?
Yes.
We'll look for the link.
When was that link sent? The other one? Was it today?
No, it's probably Tuesday.
For this after,
For the after party.
the after party, okay.
I'll forward it again.
Thank you.
Okay.
I had a system of finding it.